Folks are joining. We'll start in just a few seconds as we wait for more folks to join. Joining, we'll be starting momentarily, just waiting for everyone else to join the Zoom. Okay, I'm going to begin. Good morning. My name is Matthew Cohen, Vice President at the Long Island Association. I hope everyone had a wonderful Easter, a wonderful Passover. For those with kids who were off for spring break, hope we got to enjoy some more time with them. And if you had a chance to go away, hope you had a great time. Well, we're welcoming everyone back to work and to school, back from spring break, back from Easter, back from Passover with a great program. We're happy to bring it to you, a really great small and mid-sized business committee event. But before that, I just wanted to recognize a few people quickly. One, of course, our chairman of our board of directors, Larry Waldman from First Long Island Advisors. We also have on our co-chair, Ernie Canadeo, who's the president of the EGC group, as well as vice chair, Chrysler Quick, who's president of the finance department. They too are both LIA board members. And of course, the other co-chair of our small and mid-sized business committee and also an LIA board member, Katherine Heaviside, who's going to be moderating this event. And I'd like to introduce her now. Katherine Heaviside. Oh, morning. Sorry. Okay. Katherine Heaviside is president of Epic 5 Public Relations and has over 35 years of experience in media and community relations, crisis communications, marketing, and advertising. A regular on the power list of the top 50 influentials, Katherine has led Epic 5 to numerous awards, including being named Best PR Firm for the past 12 years in Beth Page's Best of Long Island Awards, and Epic 5 receiving the Silver Anvil, the PR industry's top award. She's done quite a remarkable job at her firm. She is an executive board member of the Long Island Association and also serves on the board of several educational and humanitarian organizations, including the United Way of Long Island. She's a good friend. She's done a great job as an LIA board member, and she did a lot of work and a great job putting this program together for our LIA members. So with that, Katherine Heaviside.
Well, thank you. And first of all, and thank you to my co-chair, Ernie, and vice chair, Chrysler. It's always wonderful to have your support and work with you. So first of all, we have this remarkable panel. And I say remarkable because it's in this day and age, we've had more challenges than ever. This panel was first conceived a year ago, January. And we already were going to say that how do we help the small and mid-sized business navigate through the increasingly complex rules and laws. And then COVID hit, and that added a 10-time exponential to that problem. While COVID was a problem because we all had to shut things down, we all had to shut things down, and there were no, there was no heavy decisions to make at that time compared to what we're facing now, which is how to reopen and how to reopen safely and legally and the kinds of problems we're facing. So the panel, we are so fortunate to have, and first, Jeffrey Schlossberg, he's a principal in the office of Jackson Lewis, and he has over 35 years in the employment law field. He also is a member of Jackson Lewis's COVID-19 National Response Team. And thank you, Jeffrey, for agreeing to come on to the panel. And we have Donna Rath. Donna is the Chief Talent Officer at Sterling Risk, one of the nation's top privately owned insurance brokers. And they have done extraordinary work and a good job in handling the COVID crisis as far as the employees. Donna has a strong background in human resources management, and there's over 220 employees, and she furthers Sterling Risk's corporate mission every day. So thank you, Donna. Dominique Dominique and I seem to share a number of clients, and it's always good to see you. And Dominique is a partner and head of the labor and employment law practice at Farrell Fritz. And she represents employers from startups to large corporations, jury trials and hearings. And she helps the business owner comply with many of the federal, state, and local laws.
Good morning.
Good morning. And last, but certainly wonderful to see, is Linda Nicolino. And she's a senior VP and general counsel of Bethpage Federal Credit Union, $108 million financial, is that? No.
10.8 billion.
No, 10 billion. Sorry, I need better glasses. That's 10 billion. Financial institution. And it's been serving the Long Island community for over 75 years. Linda is on a number of boards, and she also was general counsel and secretary of the Long Island Power Authority and assistant attorney general in charge of the Suffolk Regional Office for the New York State Attorney General prior to that. So Linda, really thank you for coming. I am just in awe of the many attributes that you all have and can bring to this subject. So while we'd like to talk a little bit about other things in dealing with HR issues, you know, I do think that we will get into some of the, you know, the COVID related. But first of all, perhaps you all can just tell us a little bit about yourselves. Jeffrey?
Thanks, Catherine, and thanks for having me on this wonderful panel, and good morning to all my co-panelists. I am a partner at Jackson Lewis, which, as many of you may know, is a national employment law firm. We have an office in Melville with about 35 or 40 attorneys. We represent exclusively management in labor and employment relations. As Catherine noted, I'm on our national COVID response team, have been since last February. I also, provide advice and counsel to many clients of all sizes in all industries, and that's pretty much in a nutshell. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Donna,
Yes.
tell us about it.
Good morning. My name is Donna Robb. I am the Chief Talent Officer at Sterling Risk. And as Catherine mentioned, I serve the needs of over 220 employees nationwide, along with my day-to-day, which is normally challenging, keeping on top of all the ever-changing laws and regulations. COVID has really become a top priority to myself and to the organization. So we've done a tremendous job, and I look forward to discussing that and sharing some of the things that we did.
Thank you. That will be great. Dominique.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Catherine. It's nice to see all of you. So it's been an interesting year. I'm a partner at Farrell Fritz, and we have a long history of partnering with business owners all over Long Island to help their businesses in all areas, from employment law to corporate, real estate, tax cert. And one of the things we know about partnering with business owners in the last year is that they've all struggled to figure out how COVID impacts their day-to-day businesses and what we do going forward. And so it's a pleasure to be here. For anybody who's interested, feel free to go to the Farrell Fritz website. I've done a series of morning town halls where we address lots of these issues. An hour is not a lot of time, so I know we're all going to try really hard to share lots of information, but I'm sure if you take a peek at our website, there's even more information there. Happy to answer any questions as we finish up today and go forward.
Okay, thank you, Dominique. Linda.
Morning, everyone. So happy to be here and share with you the tremendous knowledge that I've gained over the last year and opportunity that I've had to participate in the various teams that Bethpage has put together. Like most of us, we were able to leverage our crisis management plan in order to deal with the crisis known as this pandemic for the past 13 plus months. I was part of the strategic response team, what we affectionately referred to as the Corona response team, and now also our reopening team. So through all phases of the last year, it's been quite an exercise following the bouncing ball of executive orders and regulatory challenges that we've had. And I think we've navigated very well. I think we were very fortunate to focus on business continuity well in advance of this and find a way to very quickly have our entire workforce capable of working remotely. And yet we do have a retail branch network. We have about 750 employees. So it's been a fun year for all of us, and I'm happy to share our learnings.
Okay, thank you, Linda. All right, now let's start probably the same top of mind, which is the reopening or reimagining of our office. Perhaps, Jeffrey, maybe I could ask this one question. Can employers mandate their employees to be vaccinated?
That's a softball, Catherine.
Yeah.
Really? Bad, Jeffrey.
So, yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Catherine. I'm happy to kick this off. And this is a question I've been answering for our clients as well. So, and first of all, I should preface my comments by saying I'm focusing in any event, primarily on laws that might impact in the state of New York. That question varies across the country. So keep with that in mind. There is no law right now that would prevent an employer from mandating an employee to become vaccinated, with a caveat. And I will say that the far and away, the majority of employers that we are dealing with are not currently mandating, but what we call encouraging. So the short answer is that you can mandate and you can encourage, but if somebody presents a situation such as they have a medical condition whereby they are at risk by obtaining the vaccine and they present you with documentation from their medical provider to that effect, like in any other medical leave accommodation situation, then you do have to consider that. And it may be that that person would not be able to, and you'll have to work around that and work with that and figure out how that employee can continue. Notwithstanding they're not getting a vaccine. And the same goes for religious objections. You would handle it in the same way you would handle any other religious objection. So that's the 35,000 foot level answer. So I'll open it up with that.
Okay.
So Catherine, I'm just going to jump in. So I think
Sure.
that's 100% the legal answer. And it creates this question of how do you go about mandating vaccines? And for small businesses, primarily, where you have a few people who are together all the time, it seems like a great idea. And I've gotten a lot of questions that say, but we want to make sure everybody feels safe. And that's true. But the challenge for an organization is when you go down the road of a mandate, it's what happens when we get to the person who says, I'm just not comfortable. I am not comfortable that they've done enough research. I'm not comfortable. And the challenge with a mandate is consistency. And so if your best employee says, I'm not comfortable, I'm not doing it, what are we going to do in that circumstance? I will say there are a couple of other big things around the vaccine that employers want to think about. So New York State rolled out the reopening guidelines. That was almost a year ago. And so those reopening guidelines desperately need to be revised. They include all sorts of things that we didn't know that we now know. And so one of the things is the daily questionnaire that employees are completing. And one of those questions says, have you been exposed to someone who's tested positive for COVID-19? If you answer yes, you cannot come to work. Okay, except now we know that that's true unless you've been vaccinated. So small employers, keep in mind, you went through this process last year particularly, and look, this is true for every employer, but remember, you did these questionnaires last year, you need to revisit those because now we need to say, if you are not fully vaccinated, have you been exposed? Because if they've been fully vaccinated, no need to quarantine. Sorry for jumping in.
Donna, what have you seen at Sterling Risk?
We're encouraging our employees to get vaccinated. I'm sending out every week or two updates on eligibility. I go on to the state sites daily, because I understand the pain point of trying to get that appointment. It's like you hit the lotto. We're offering the leave, obviously, that New York State has just put in play, and we've even broadened that nationwide to employees that are outside of the New York area. So we're really encouraging our staff to go ahead and get vaccinated so that we can take this virus head on and put some safety precautions in place and all get together, hopefully again soon.
Linda, you have a particularly difficult situation with how many branches do you have?
34.
With employees in each branch around Long Island, and they're customer facing every day. How are you handling that?
Well, it's been very difficult because when the vaccine started to become available, unfortunately, financial institution employees, even though they're customer facing, were not considered part of the first responders. So now that it's opened up, it's become a little bit different. We did get a lot of inquiries from our employees as to whether or not we were going to provide vaccine site availability for them and things like that. And of course, we really just couldn't even if we wanted to. So I would say we took a very neutral approach. We provided a lot of information. I mean, we've been communicating with our employees pretty nonstop throughout the entire pandemic about, the latest developments. And like I said, it's ever changing, right? But we were very cautious about either encouraging or incentivizing vaccines, because it did present a lot of difficulties. And culturally, I think it's a real issue for a lot of companies too, which is, you don't want to create a culture where if an employee doesn't get vaccinated, they have issues with their coworkers. So we've been pretty neutral and just providing information, factual information to our employees.
Okay.
One of the other interesting things, Catherine, was when they rolled out the vaccine, lots of employers jumped on board and said, we're going to offer paid time off. And so the American Relief Act actually gives employers the ability to offer paid time off and for them to take a tax credit on the federal side against the federal payroll tax for time off to get the vaccine, time off because someone is sick because of the vaccine. New York State mandates that employers give that time off too, but if you offer it under the federal law, then you, the employer, are not absorbing the cost. You can go ahead and you can pass it through the tax credit. So think about that as you offer that time off. It is mandated in New York State, but if you do it under the federal law, you get the tax benefit.
And if I can just add to that, Catherine, that I agree with Dominique, but there's one thing, because Linda mentioned incentives. There was a period of time, about even just a month ago or so, before New York passed the mandatory time off, where the conversation was about incentives. And perhaps companies are out there offering incentives. Maybe it's like an Amazon gift card or something like that. And, we were confronting issues with our clients when they brought that up, because, what happens if somebody says, I can't get vaccinated, and you're basically would be denying them this incentive and arguably, creating a disability discrimination situation. I think for the most part, I would say that the incentives are no longer really required, those gift card things, because of the New York law. So if anybody is still doing that, in other words, the incentives, I don't think you need to. The problem was there was no paid time off. So you wanted to encourage, like Donna is encouraging, Linda is encouraging, that's what they were doing. But now you don't have to do that. You can use the New York law and give them paid time off. That's a great incentive.
All right, as a small business, how much time do I have to give for paid time off?
So it's 4 hours per vaccine, it says up to 4 hours per vaccine. So it would be 8 hours for the, Camp Pfizer, and 8 for Moderna, and 4 for Johnson & Johnson. It says up to, but From my experience, everybody I've spoken to is giving the 4 hours. They're not tracking whether it's 2 hours and that's all you get. So that's the amount of time at their regular base salary.
Now, people who have already received, let's say, received the vaccine, is that something that an employer should be looking back and saying, well, you've received it? Or is it something that employer, it's a forward going?
I think, Dominique, I don't know if you agree, but I think it's forward going.
Yeah, so do I.
All right. So with so many employees working remotely, is there any specific federal or state posting requirements for these employees? Maybe Donna, you could answer that for us.
Sure. Being that it's either a full remote or a hybrid type of work setting, we're required to provide postings. And if you're not in a physical state, how do you do this? How do you accomplish it? So it can be done electronically. We do it via our intranet, but smaller companies can send out the postings via email. When I do updates, and there's a lot of updates lately, multi-state, multi-sited, I send it out, read receipt. So this way I'm able to track it, and constantly I'm keeping employees abreast of what all the changes are. Again, there's no physical location, so there has to be a way to at least tap into some type of source for employees to understand what's changed and what affects them in their particular state.
Now, just out of curiosity, the mandated vaccine policies, if that, if you mandate a vaccine for your employees, is it, is this something that has a negative effect on the employee morale for an organization? Linda, maybe you can take that, because you have, how many employees at Bethpage?
About 750. Yeah, I think that's what we were worried about, Catherine. We didn't want to mandate it because we understand legally that there are exceptions that we have to respect and honor. It could raise questions about people's health conditions. It certainly could create a culture where people are not willing to work with their coworkers if they haven't been vaccinated. And our employees are a pretty collegiate group. We are very proud of the fact that they were very willing to come out during the pandemic and work on the front lines. And we believe we protected them. First and foremost, our CEO's message has been safety, 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 employees and members through the entire pandemic. And actually, our members wanted us to open up the branches more fully, and we were very reluctant to go out too fast, too soon, because safety was such a priority. But I think it just really calls into question whether or not you change the culture and the working and collaborative nature of the workplace when you do that type of mandate. So we didn't do it. Now with the vaccines being available more broadly, it's just not going to happen. And similar to Jeffrey, we do a lot of investigation into what our brethren are doing in the financial industry, and we couldn't find one case of anybody mandating it, even though the branch networks are frontline workers. So we really just felt comfortable with where we are, and it hasn't been an issue. So we've been really happy. We've had obviously positive cases like everyone else, and we've had to limit and restrict branch service from time to time. But touch wood, we've been very fortunate with keeping our workforce safe.
By the way, either Jeffrey or Dominique, have you seen litigation already regarding COVID related? And what do we have as a small to mid-sized company? What do we have to be worried about in the future?
So it's interesting. I think the biggest issue is timing. So I'm already seeing claims of retaliation based on somebody's employment is terminated after a COVID-19 event, whether they were quarantining or isolating because they were positive. And so sort of traditional kinds of discrimination, retaliation issues, right? So when we fire somebody and we make that decision, is it well documented? What is the legitimate business rationale? What we've now added to the mix is, was this person on COVID-19 leave shortly before they were terminated? And so we're seeing some of that. I'm seeing less questions about, did I contract it in the workplace? I haven't seen any of those. They're out there. There's some litigation out there about employees who claim they've been exposed. We're also starting to see some complaining about employers who are not compliant. And in New York, I think the biggest issue for employers, particularly small businesses, is the nightmare of how much time to pay somebody when they're out because of a COVID incident. New York State had a really easy law, maybe I'm saying easy, but on March 18th of 2020, New York enacted paid COVID sick leave. Okay, that seemed relatively straightforward. We knew exactly what we were giving. The federal government stepped in on April 1st of 2020 and gave us Families First. That was really good for small employers because it wasn't costing the business. You were the pass-through and the cash flow is an issue, but you were getting that back on the tax credit. New York State issued a memo. The Department of Labor issued a memo in January saying you could have a lot of COVID sick leaves. That's a disaster and it is complicated. And I'm not sure it's true and I'm not sure that it's valid, but it's out there. And so I think for small businesses, that's the place where they need the most help. Figuring out when somebody tells me they're COVID positive, how much time am I supposed to pay them for? And that continues to be the biggest challenge.
So if I could add to that, so at Jackson Lewis, we have something called a COVID-19 Lit Watch, and it's actually on our website at jacksonlewis.com, and we are tracking nationally all litigation that's related to COVID-19. And I'm looking here because I have my stats up here. In New York, we have 132 total lawsuits filed related to COVID since the beginning of the pandemic through April 1st. And the largest number are basically discrimination and claims, and then leave accommodation claims follow. So people will claim that I had a medical condition, you didn't accommodate me, or you didn't apply FMLA correctly, or the Families First EFMLA. And then the next biggest one is retaliation / whistleblower, because people will bring to a company's attention, you weren't compliant, and then they get fired, allegedly, unlawfully. So I think that one of the, these are already happened. So, that this is the trend. I think that the biggest issues that I'm still talking to client, well, one of the biggest issues is the whole work from home situation, and companies trying to bring people back in a point in time where we now know that working from home works in many, many jobs. And whereas, 2 years ago, you could say, well, you can't work from home. It's not practical. We need you here. At this point, you have people working from home. The company says you want to bring them back. And they're like, the employee says, I can't, I still have a high risk condition. And it's hard to say after a year where they've been working at home with no performance review problems or anything like that, to all of a sudden now bring them back. It seems retaliatory. So, in terms of litigation, these are the types of things where proactively I would want business owners to be mindful of that. We now have a track record of working from home, and it's not as simple as maybe it used to be.
Okay, thank you. Donna, did you wanted to add to that?
No, I'm in agreement with that. It's a new thing that we're going to have to kind of reformulate how the workforce is going to look. For us, I would say we will bring people back the way that we kind of pulled back and had people go home. It's a slow start and ease back into the workforce. And everybody's different. Everybody feels it's such a personal it's a personal feeling that people feel about getting vaccinated and the COVID environment and the anxiety that you have going back into the workplace. So I think the sensitivity around that makes that transition a little bit easier, and having a really good plan in place to take that into consideration helps a lot.
Yeah, I do think for small employers, what you should think about, and I've said this a number of times, you want to be kind. However, small employers need their people to be working, and oftentimes they do need them in the office. And we're going to hear a lot in the next several months about, but I was able to do my job at home. And that's true, but let's not pretend that I was able to do my job in the middle of a pandemic at home is the same as we're going forward in a thriving economy. And so we have to consider it when there's a disability issue. We have to consider it if there's a religious issue, but small employers don't have to be sort of acquiescent to, but everybody wants to work at home. That may be important, and you may need to consider what the competitive advantage is in allowing people to do that. But there's going to be a moment when you decide, in my business, it's important that people are here. And that's okay too. It's okay to want people in the office.
And you need that interaction and that collaboration. It's very difficult through a Zoom meeting or, you know, over the phone to get that collaboration. People need people. We need people. It's lonely, right?
Definitely.
So if I could just jump in from a mid-size employer perspective. So that's all true. And, you know, we all miss the interaction and whatnot. But for a company that has commercial space and was bumping up against commercial space availability, and how do they manage their costs against the growth of the company, using this opportunity to say, wow, we really can keep a lot of our workforce at home and happy. Our employees are very happy. A majority of them either don't want to come back full time in the office or at all, some want a hybrid, and we're going to try to accommodate that and use that to our advantage to determine how we can manage our commercial, rental space. And I think that it balances the employee experience against the business need and cost, and in a very favorable way. So we're using this as an opportunity to really leverage the moment in time to make it work for us economically. And we hear so much about the millennial workforce wanting all these accommodations. They want to work from home largely, generalization, but that's what we hear. But we found that, kind of our older employees like it as well for different reasons. And if they're able to be engaged, albeit managed differently, and still be productive and happier, that's about as good as it gets from an employer perspective. So we're using it as an opportunity to get feedback from our employees and make it work for us.
Okay, thank you. So let's say as a small to mid-sized employer, we want to go about this in the most strategic way. If we had our things to do list, what would you say would be the first thing we should consider and put on that list?
In terms of reopening, in terms of returning to work?
Yes, in terms of reopening the business and really re-energizing our organizations. And given the fact that some people may be working part-time from home or full-time from home, what kinds of things should we be mindful of, particularly legally? I mean, I think we have that, I think we can work out the what works from a human standpoint, but legally, we don't want to do anything that's going to have us turn to Dominique and Jeffrey and say, okay, bail us out, please.
Right. So we do like to work with our clients proactively. We don't want them calling us only for litigation after the fact. But I mean, I think to try to answer that question in the most generalized way possible, I think that this should be something that is looked at strategically in a plan, like you might do in a reduction in force. Like if you're going to be, reducing a workforce by a substantial number, you would plan, hopefully, you would analyze, what's the impact on different classifications and parts of the business. I think that when you're trying to recall employees back, that you have to kind of take that type of global picture of your organization. And maybe it's, a unit by unit consideration, department by department. We have clients with all kinds of different types of workers. One size doesn't necessarily all fit all, of course. And so I think that the hurdle is sometimes, maybe one part of the organization pushes, we need our people back. And so you start making these like micro analyses of a small portion of the workforce. And then when you have to do that again later, you're like, well, we let them come back. How do we now, or we didn't let them come back. How do we make these next group come back? And you have to make sure you're doing things based on objective criteria. So I would try to internally document why, certain decisions are being made so that you're protected and someone doesn't later come and say, you selected me or you treated me differently because of my fill in the blank. So that's.
So I have two things before people come back, and in this process of bringing more people back. The first one is New York State requires that employers have a reopening the safety plan. Candidly, they need to revise that guidance, but let's put that aside for the moment. Everybody should have a reopening safety plan. I encourage people, and I looked at one yesterday. We have to be really careful that we don't make promises we can't keep. And so I strike out all of the language in those plans that say, we're going to keep you safe. Yeah, of course that's our intent, but I can't promise anybody that. And we know that about COVID. We have asymptomatic people, we have asymptomatic spread. So really important to have a safety plan that is written. I want to communicate that to everybody, but I want to be really careful about concrete nuts and bolts in that plan. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. This is what our expectation is if you need to quarantine or isolate. I don't want to promise safety. We can't promise that. So that's issue number one. I want that really communicated well. The second issue for me goes to what Jeff said, which is let's be really careful about telling people, yes, they can come in, or we're going to mandate this group come in, but we're not going to mandate this other group. That's bad from a legal perspective. Somebody's going to claim discrimination. It's also just incredibly bad from an employee morale perspective. So come up with a plan about what makes sense. I'm sure, Linda, for you guys, there wasn't really much of a choice. You had forward-facing employees. They had to come back first. And so you couldn't really do much with that. In a law firm, there are people that can do their job easily at home. There are people that just can't. So think about those bigger criteria across your business. You're a small, mid-sized business. You probably have a lot of different kinds of employees. So just think through which work makes the most sense to continue doing at home, which work makes the most sense to bring back to our workspace.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that, Catherine, is I'd say do it slowly. Do it slowly, see how it works. We're starting with a pilot where we're bringing some back office people in on a small scale. We'll see after a couple of weeks if everybody's safe and the protocols are working. If other people want to join, then we'll start what we're calling our phased reopening and add people to it until we hit really our sweet spot in terms of balancing who wants to come back hybrid or full-time to the workplace. And I think that helps you work out the kinks. Is the safety plan working and things like that.
Yeah.
We've done similar as well, and I think easing in slowly is key, and then you can assess, take a step back, and see how it's working or what you need to kind of tweak or revise. I also put in protocols, like a protocol in place. So yes, I agree, Dominique. Like you can't say 100% we're giving you safety, but there are protocols and some safeguards that can be put in place, and having employees kind of go through that in a webinar format to understand the modifications that have been done in the workplace and what is expected of them, whether it be taking the assessment, wearing your mask, of course, social distancing, all these things can help to protect. It's never foolproof, but they're all steps to try and make it a safer work environment.
And if I have to predict the next question I get asked, is, well, do we have to have 100% mask policy when people are in a room with all people who have been vaccinated? That'll be the next question.
And the answer is?
So depending on your workplace, my advice is we continue to mask for as long as there is a mask mandate in New York.
All right, I know that someone had sent in a question, and by the way, Dominique, you a very high marks for being on the panel. The question was that she had a company that is trying, laid off or furloughed a lot of administrative people who are now, do not want to come back because they are receiving COBRA and the higher unemployment insurance. And how do you handle that? And maybe Donna, since you have a number of people perhaps in that category, have you found any magic of how to do that?
For us personally, we haven't laid or furloughed anybody off.
Okay.
Been fortunate. We have our full workforce, and we've been doing fine with retention as far as that goes. Same thing with COBRA right now. There's the new subsidy that's going on. We'll be reaching out. There's only a few people that really would fall into play on that were, parting ways, but we haven't really encountered that. Fortunately, we haven't.
Yeah. I mean, I'm certainly hearing from small businesses that they had to do that, particularly in the restaurant industry, where they had to cut back staff, right? And so there are a couple of things. There's no magic bullet, but here's what I would say to you. The employer needs to put in writing the request that people return to work. Start with the basics, right? Don't rely on just the phone call, put it in writing, because when you put it in writing, you're also going to tell the Department of Labor that you have offered this person their job back. And once you do that, they're no longer eligible for unemployment insurance. They'll no longer be eligible for COBRA subsidies if they would be eligible. Now, would I tell you to cut back the subsidy? I probably wouldn't tell you to do that. That makes me nervous. And I don't want you in a litigation over a $500 subsidy, because the litigation will be significantly more expensive than that. But certainly you want to make sure that you're putting that offer to return back on the table in writing so that there can be no dispute about it, and let the Department of Labor know. But it's going to be a challenge as we look forward, because right now there is a pretty, there's a benefit to staying home.
I saw, certainly last year when you had the $600 extra unemployment kicker, where people were earning more off work than on work, that there was a lot of resistance. But at the same time, at that time, companies that I was dealing with who had that issue were, not in the economic position to, or decided not to make draw a line in the sand. That seems to have receded a little bit, but even so, last year, when people took the position that, why should I come back? Eventually, we were guiding our employers, clients to, set out a course of communication that says, look, we need you here. If you are opting not to return, then this is going to be a voluntary, abandonment of your job. Please let us know by X date what your intentions are. So, at some point you have to, take control and not let the the employee dictate, what's happening here. So sometimes that's uncomfortable, but, it is something within the employer's rights. And with COBRA being mentioned, I know, I'm sure everybody's aware that under the new law that was just passed federally in March, the American Rescue Act, that employers are required now to pay 100% of COBRA benefits, assuming the employee did not quit. And so that's something you might want to just keep in mind and remember. If you're severing somebody and you have to develop an economic package, keep in mind that regardless, you're going to have to pay 100% of the employee's COBRA from now through September 30th, and you get a tax credit on the back end. But that's going to be an economic hit now that you'll have to lay out. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you. Starting now, what should employers and employees do to prepare for the eventual return to the office? From what you've said, we should have a safety plan. And I assume, is there any guidance on that safety plan through the government? Or should we see Jeff and Dominique?
Both.
There is, if you go on the if you Google New York Forward reopening guidance, there's guidance for every industry. What I would say about that is, remember that it's old. I mean, all of that guidance was issued back in May and June. They have not revised that guidance. I would be surprised, frankly, if they invested the resources to revise it. I think everybody's hoping that there'll be very little mandates come September, but go through that carefully. And so look at those plans. Because it's so old, and even at the time, I think it makes sense to get some counsel on that. You know, have a conversation, make sure it works for you. And look, the basics are relatively straightforward. You're going to have a masking policy. You're going to have a social distancing policy. You're going to have a screening policy that makes employees tell us they're not currently experiencing COVID symptoms. And from my perspective, we go back to sort of what I said at the very beginning. The biggest culture shift that I am hoping we are going to see post-pandemic is sick people don't come to work. I mean, remember the days when people were hacking up a lung and walking in because I'm so important, I can't not be here, I have to work. You know what, work at home, do not come to work and spread your germs, whether they're COVID germs or flu germs or whatever other kind of germs you have. Just stay home when you're sick. And my hope is that that is the culture that really survives COVID and the pandemic. But I think, Katherine, to your point, those are the things that they've got to be looking at. And look, I also think there are more small businesses that are further along in this process than we may think. Most small businesses sometime last summer started to have people back in their office. And so I think now what they're really struggling with is this question of, can we live with a hybrid lifestyle? And that's a question every business is going to confront, because it's not really a legal issue, although there are going to be some legal issues, as Jeff mentioned, the reasonable accommodation question, but it's really about a business and a culture issue. And so as we go into what I hope to be a very low incident of COVID over the summer, people are going to want to work remotely, and businesses are going to have to decide, does that work for us?
Now, can an employer ask for proof of vaccination, Jeff?
Yes, the employer definitely can do that. And I mean, look, most of the vaccination cards don't disclose, the ones I've seen, don't disclose any confidential medical information other than that they got vaccinated. However, you know, you want to tell employees that if you're going to ask for proof, I would proactively tell them, please do not provide us with any, you know, medical information, only, you know, proof that you got vaccinated. Because once you get, that's not a medical inquiry under the Americans with Disabilities Act, asking for vaccination proof. So you can do that. But if you get medical information with that, like, you know, some other, I don't know what employees might provide you, but then, you know, you are in possession of that information and you have to keep it confidential and separate. And so you want to try to not get that. But yes, bottom line is you can ask for proof.
But by the way, what are you going to do after you ask? So I want to know what they're going to do next, because asking for proof because you want time off, easy. Okay, right. Good.
Well, I assume that's why. Yeah.
Well, yeah, okay. So I'm getting the question from lots of small business owners who say, I just want to know if my people are vaccinated. And my concern with that question, sort of more broadly, is what happens when somebody says no? Inquiry stop, hard stop because I don't want to ask about their medical condition. I also want to be careful at that point that I'm not discriminating against them. I could envision claims down the road of I got fired because I wouldn't get vaccinated, even though there was no mandate in place. And so, yes, you can ask, but be careful.
Right, and it's still an emergency use authorization. It's not really, formally, approved by the FDA. So there are some concerns about that, but I 100% agree. My answer was, I assumed, that it was in context with getting proof to pay the 4 or 8 hours,
Right.
and not just some random survey, which I would counsel against.
Yeah, lots of people want to know.
I know.
So Catherine, I'm just going to jump on one other thing that we haven't talked about, but that I am hearing lots of questions about, and that is this question of, so I have to pay when people are out because of COVID. Is that the same as the New York State sick leave law? The answer to that is no. Big fat, big letters, no. New York State sick leave, which went into effect on January 1, is in addition to and separate from all of the COVID paid sick leave. So small businesses just need to make sure that they're up to date. They know how many hours they have to give. They have to make sure that they're giving it. It's sick and safe leave in New York State. It is now a mandate. And so just let's make sure that you keep that separate from your COVID sick leave. Very different. And yes, it does mean employees get both.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, Donna, and you seem to have a very complex organization and that handles this. Has there anything that you would, and both you and Linda are in, have more employees than many of the organizations that are on this call. Is there anything that you have that you'd say we ought to copy? You have mandates. Are they listed? Do you write letters to your employees? Are there emails that go out? How do you handle that?
I think for us, it's been huge communication throughout the whole entire process. I think a lot of what Linda said, like I could nod my head in agreement because we were right there. We were out in front of it. We really made sure that we took into consideration how everybody was feeling and the anxiety and the hesitation. We knew when to go hybrid to saying, okay, now let's go full remote, and did it full remote in 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, we had over 220 employees working from home. So I think it's the communication. It starts with our CEO, who's sending out communications every 2 weeks. The state of the market for our industry, as well as the science behind what's going on with COVID and the advances that are being made. And then for me, it's that morale issue, and kind of those touches and wrapping my hands around people that need that touch and need that assurance, and making sure that we're always leading with integrity first. I mean, if everyone could duplicate that, I think it would be great. That it takes away that hesitation that people have. They know everything along the way that you're doing. There's no surprises.
Yeah, I would add to that. I agree with everything Donna said. We communicate mostly through a mobile app with our employees, which has proven to be invaluable. And that was kind of a lesson after the last storm event that we had, where we didn't have the opportunity to use email the way that we wanted to. And that was, again, part of go back to our crisis management plan. But what I would say is, the one thing I think you struggle with as an employer is wanting to give your employees definitive answers. And I think the one thing we can all agree is that there were no definitive answers to a whole lot of things throughout this. And it's okay. It's okay to tell your employees, we're figuring it out. And as soon as we know something, we'll let you know, or this is what we know now that is subject to change because, again, bouncing ball of, regulatory orders. So we really tried to be as honest in the moment as we could be and as communicative and try to stay ahead of the curve. So by putting together, kind of a cross-functional team, we had lots of resources available to focus on different things because it was just a lot. It was just too much for, any one organization like our HR department or our legal department. So it was really spread across the organization so that everybody had their piece. We would collaborate literally daily in the beginning, and we would come to, consensus, if not complete agreement, as to how to proceed in order to keep our employees educated, informed, and comforted that we were staying on top of it and looking out for their best interest, which we continue to do all these months later. So I think that it was uncomfortable to not give definitive guidance to them, but I think everyone kind of learned early on that, it was just really impossible to do that. So being really active in and honest with your employees, I think, has been key.
Well, I think that, it's Sterling Risk and Best Page are known for being, employers of preference. And you all guys, do have reputations of doing it right. I think it's sometimes a struggle for smaller employers to handle a lot of the issues you handle and handles them well. So I appreciate the fact that you're doing this, and we are almost out of time. And I'd like to just do a quick, is there anything we haven't covered that you would like to hear from? You'd like me to ask you? No? Okay.
No.
Well, thank you all. I think it's been an educational experience for me. And it's really great to see you all without masks. And someday I'll be able to hug you all, but I guess it's not going to happen for a while. Or maybe, considering two attorneys here, maybe I shouldn't be hugging anybody right now, right? Oh no, 3 attorneys, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're never hugging again.
We're never hugging, we're never.
That place. No.
All right, well, thank you all. And Matt Cohen, thank you. He's the acting president of the LIA currently and doing a remarkable job. Thank you, Matt, for putting this all together. And of course, in my organization, Jasper Chu. So.
Thank you, and
Thanks,
have a
everyone.
great day.
It's a pleasure. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Well,
Bye.
Bye.